Good afternoon and welcome to St. Rita's School for the Deaf. My name is Angie Frith and I'm the president here at the school. And we are so glad that you're able to be with us today in the first of a series of presentations that the school will host throughout the year. As we all know, change is hard. It's even harder when there are barriers to communication, especially when it's involving children who respond and exhibit different feelings and actions. So today, I'm honored to have three professional experts with me who have a connection to St. Rita's who will be presenting. Helen Asbury, who's our clinical psychologist and a member of the St. Rita board. Maryann Barth, a longtime employee and mental health counselor who consults with St. Rita's. And Bethany Hodges, our St. Rita school counselor who's been here for the past 7 years and wears multiple hats every single day. So we are excited to have them share with you the ingredients and understanding that are needed to help a child to be successful during these changing times of COVID-19. Helen?
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I am really happy to be here today. Last year I was giving a talk for parents and teachers and those who have children in their lives, and we were naive, I think, to think that we were coming back to school after everything had been shut down in the spring, and what the talk was more or less about how to return to school with masks and social distancing. But I think we thought we were just on a kind of a straight line to things getting better, and that we were almost over the hump. And I think now we know that we are in ever-changing circumstances, and it makes it so much harder to know how to help the children in our lives. So today what I want to talk about is what we do to help children feel secure, confident, brave, and understood, and what are the ingredients for helping them to be able to flourish even though they're in these ever-changing times. I guess I'm going to start by talking about the three things that I think I see most frequently in my own practice and what teachers and parents call me about, especially in this time frame, and it's about grief, anxiety, and depression. And it's not that these three categories are specific. I mean, they overlap. Sometimes we have a child who's already anxious and now they're grieving. Often when someone is grieving, they become anxious. If grief gets prolonged, they may become depressed. So I don't want to make it sound like they don't share a lot of the same characteristics, but it might help you as you're helping them to think in terms of what's their behavior telling us. Often children have trouble communicating what they feel, and so it comes out in behavior. And a lot of times psychologists, for example, will say they're acting out, and they don't mean that they're acting up, although they might be. It really sort of means they're putting on a play, and they're using their behavior so that we can figure out what in the world is going on. And once we figure it out, then how do we want to respond to that? Probably the most important thing is if we can be having empathy for them. Sometimes people think that means just looking at the world if we were in their shoes. And it's almost that, but it's as if we are them in their shoes, looking at the world. Not how would we feel in their situation, but how do they feel? Recently, a grief counselor described it to me as it's not just looking in a hole that someone fell into and saying, oh, I'm so sorry you're down there. That would be more sympathy. It's more like climbing into the hole and seeing how it feels to be down there and helping them get out. And so that's what we're trying to do, is how do we join with our children so that that happens. There are times when children aren't outwardly expressing how they feel, and then you'll see them more shut down and sad or numb or kind of pulling back. I'm going to start by just saying, keep in the back of your mind, no matter which one of us is talking, we're really talking about how to be calm and confident in how we respond, and to provide as much predictability, because children really thrive on knowing what to expect. And within predictability, also consistency. And you might think, what's the difference between those two things? When I'm talking about consistency, it might be that the same rules apply, or there's the same boundaries. For example, you're not allowed to shove in the classroom. You're not allowed to shove someone on the bus or on the playground. But how the teacher or the person supervising the playground responds might be a little different. How a grandparent responds to how maybe somebody's mother responds might be different, but the rules stay pretty much the same. And that's just sort of in the background as we listen to all of these. Yeah. So I'm first going to talk about grief. I don't know if you guys felt this way when the pandemic sort of broke out and was coming our way across the ocean, but I remember listening on the news when they said we've almost reached 1,000 deaths from COVID-19. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I could picture what 1,000 people would be like. And then it was 3,000, and they compared it to the World Trade Center. Now we're up to almost 700,000 deaths. And it's kind of an unimaginable number, but the children pick up on there has been a ton of loss. We're really a country and a world grieving. And so children now are much more likely to know someone who has died either during the pandemic of something else or from COVID-19, or they know someone who knows someone. So they're much more growing up with this idea that we're at high risk. They've also lost things like their social connections, especially when they have to go into quarantine or learn remotely. And then, as you know, like so many special events. It might be the last day of school where they would normally bring their teacher some flowers, or it might be graduation or an anniversary, or they missed a wedding, or they didn't go trick-or-treating. All of those are losses, and they're also in our culture for developmental reasons. We need those milestones, and we need those connections and markers. We often need those acknowledgments. So, you know, sometimes we'll respond like, oh, it's not such a big deal that you didn't go to your soccer banquet. Well, to them it is, but you might be prone to say, well, at least, you know, your grandparents got well. We really need to, again, climb down into that hole with them and know how that feels to be missing so many special things they've looked forward to. One other thing about grief in children that I wanted to make sure I mentioned is that they tend to grieve in doses, so it can be too painful to just sit with it for too long. So you'll see a child maybe crying or complaining or throwing a tantrum, and then the next thing you know, they're roughhousing with their sibling, or they're playing with the dog, or they're running around in the yard, and you think, oh, they're pretty happy, or they don't really understand. It's really that they're just trying to get as much as they can handle and then try and get themselves, get their energy back up again. So those are some things. The other is the kids are much more irritable when they're grieving. They're oppositional. They're also sometimes disobedient in little minor ways, and you think they're just not quite acting like themselves, or things are a little out of the ordinary. Those are all reasons to probably check in with them and try to figure out how they're feeling. And as we move through this talk, we will be giving you a lot of ways to actually make that connection so that you can figure out, is it they're frustrated, or are they disappointed, or are they happy, or what is it? And we'll be coming to that soon. The next thing, I guess these are the things that I was just sort of addressing, that happy 1 minute, sad the next, the irritable or oppositional. Sometimes it's just really obvious and all they need is a hug, and you can see that. Other times, especially let's say with teenagers or kids who are less likely to be wanting to feel dependent, it may be harder to know what to do. So this slide is really what to do when children, what do children really need when they are expressing their grief. And understanding their feelings, we've talked about. If your child signs but you don't sign, just learning a few signs that have feeling words can help you know, is it that you're sad or is it that you're hungry? Is it that you're angry or is it that you're frustrated? And your trying to understand will mean a lot. They'll know that they're on your radar, and you'll have some tools so that they can tell you what's going on. Maryann will be talking more about using rituals and routines because that provides a structure for them that when everything else is out of whack, they've got those things to count on. I would also say that children will keep pressing your buttons, and when things feel out of control, they will try to control anything. And you will often see many more power struggles around routines or any number of things, because if they can control something or someone, it makes them think their anxiety will come down. It usually makes it worse because they know they're really not in charge, nor have the wisdom to be in charge. But that's something that I've seen a lot of parents calling saying they never used to be this oppositional, and now they really are. So I wanted to move on to just talk a little bit about anxiety, because anxiety differs a little in that we have, we've evolved to have anxiety for a good reason. Or if you're walking through the woods and you come across a bear, it's really good to get a little anxious and decide how am I going to respond. When we get anxious, our adrenaline, or our epinephrine, goes up. And we have three ways of typically responding. We can either flee, we can fight, or we can fight. And sometimes when children are anxious, you see those in different ways. Fleeing might be going away from the family in a way they don't normally do. Fighting might be that they kind of take you on in a power struggle. Freezing is often feeling like they kind of can't move and their eyes get big. I was treating someone recently who hadn't been able to keep up with their homework well, especially because they were still working virtually. And when the father confronted the child about they could go on Schoology or something and see that there were assignments missing, the child just stared. The father interpreted that as disrespect, like don't look me in the eye like that and look so defiant. But actually the child was frightened and then fled and ran upstairs. So sometimes we're seeing behavior that isn't what you used to see your child do. The other thing about adrenaline is it really shuts down motivation. And so if you do have kids learning online, for example, how do we get them to do their homework? Or how do we get them to get back to their teacher if they're supposed to send an email? Something like that. It's tough. So the antidote is actually to try and lift the endorphins. And those are sort of the good brain chemicals that help us be motivated and actually feel happier. And we do that often through aerobic exercise. It could be running in the yard and playing tag. It can be going for a walk. It could be doing some exercise like the hokey pokey in the living room. But just getting that movement can be super helpful. So what you'll see during these signs are more things like nail biting, sweaty palms, racing heart. There are a lot of things that are more kind of associated with anxiety than they are with other things. And younger children especially will complain of body aches. They'll have a stomach ache, a headache. They'll even come up and say, I used to teach first grade, and sometimes I had an anxious little girl. She would just come up and go, my arm hurts right here. Like, I'm sorry, how did that happen? Well, we don't know. But it was really, what I tell myself as a teacher and as a parent is if I'm thinking to myself, you're just doing that for attention, I try to reframe that as, oh, they probably need my attention, in a positive sense. And so I will even verbalize in some way or use a picture in some way, ask, do you need my attention or do you need help? Then they can kind of regroup and change their behavior some. We've talked about they'll become more controlling. Also, children you'll see trouble sleeping, either early morning awakening or trouble falling asleep, being sort of apathetic, like they just don't feel like doing anything, nothing really matters. And being, on the other hand, kids who get anxious, some get very perfectionistic. Everything has to be exactly right. And if something's not exactly right, they'll burst out crying, they'll say disparaging remarks about themselves, and they just feel like they can't hang on. It's like, I've got to make this right. So those are some things to think about. The others, sometimes it will look a little bit like an attention disorder. Children who are anxious can look very distractible, fidgety, impulsive. But if that's something new, it's probably more likely to be anxiety. I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about depression in children. And the way I would distinguish this as a category anyway from anxiety or grief is that with ongoing depression, you usually have a certain amount of helplessness, like I just can't do it, whatever it is, powerlessness, hopelessness. It's just like things don't matter. There's no way, it'll never be okay. It's very negative thinking. And so that is a little different. Although you can still, with depression, you will definitely often see changes in eating. Either someone who starts eating way more than usual to comfort themselves, or who just totally loses their appetite, or eats at very different times of day than usual. With sleep, they may be afraid to fall asleep because they will be having nightmares, or they may be afraid there's something in their closet. You just see kind of this heightened sense of both anxiety and depression creating trouble with sleep. And then early morning awakening can happen in this case as well. So those are some things to look out for. There are only so many behaviors a child can exhibit, and that's why sometimes I think, well, trouble sleeping can mean any number of things. The object is to try and figure out what it means to this child right now. I want to talk about some ways to help, because there's so many things we can do. And for children of all ages, when I say children, I'm really talking about pretty much through the lifespan of, you can do these things with 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, as well as 17 and 18-year-olds. One thing that I found really helpful is to use what is a worry jar. And you can use a bowl or a sugar jar or whatever you want. And when the child keeps worrying, we'll have children who get into what we call what-if thinking. What if this happens? What if that happens? And then you try to reassure them and reassure them. We find that if we do that, we keep them on the subject too long. We're still thinking about the very worrisome thing. So, I see why you're worried, and maybe talk about it for a minute, maybe 2 minutes, but then say, that is a big worry. Let's write it down and put it in the worry jar. And pick a time of day, not right before bed, to say, we're going to pull this out and worry. It might be 4 o'clock in the afternoon after they've had a snack, something like that. And the whole point is we're going to worry about this, and we're going to worry about it as much as we need to, and then we're going to put it back in the worry jar and we'll pull it out again later. That is truly a way of containing a worry, and they know that they won't forget about it, so they don't have to keep it going in their mind. We will get back to it. Likewise, if you have a worry wall, this could be a whiteboard, this could be a chalkboard, this could be chalk on your driveway, it could be using bright markers, to have them draw a picture or write words about something that's either worrying them or making them really angry. My only rule about the anger, if you use it as anger, is we don't name names really. It can't really be I hate my brother, but it can be I feel frustrated when people pick on me. It could be something that helps them get out what those feelings are. Also, we can teach all children to do progressive muscle relaxation. And that moves our body from that hyper alert, what we call the sympathetic nervous system, into the parasympathetic, in other words, into the system where you're more at rest. And muscle relaxation will really help with that. So does yoga or deep breathing, journaling, dancing. We know that being in nature really helps, so going on a nature walk or walking around the neighborhood and looking for different colored leaves. It can be anything that just redirects and is known to be more calming. And I meant to say this at the beginning, and I'll say it now. You're under all the same stress, you're going through the same pandemic, and it's really important to get self-care, so some of these same things can help. And if you're in one of those power struggles or moments where you just have had it, my advice is to walk away. And sometimes you'll read in a parenting article, count to 10. Well, you might have to count to 587. I mean, you could have just felt like, I really need a break. And you can say, in some way, you could have a picture, there could be a way to convey to your child, I'll be back. I'm not leaving because I'm mad. I need a break. And so you go. And maybe you get a quick warm shower or bath. Maybe you call a friend. Maybe you call the school if it's something where you feel like I'm getting worried, this is a pattern, but find some support. If you can do 10 minutes of yoga or do some journaling in the evening, help yourself too. We're going to be talking in a minute more about things we can do to help children. My biggest kind of thing I want to say right now is sometimes children feel like they have to put on a happy face. They know we're worried. They know that you're trying to help. And so I sometimes be also alert to that child who's looking like they're doing a little better than they should be doing, and make sure that they have the opportunity to express what their feelings are. We know with anxiety, grief, and depression, if you can get your feelings out, you'll do much better. Usually grief therapists talk about grief as the feelings that we have inside, and they talk about mourning as the way we get them out. How do we express our grief? And that is the same in all these areas, how important it is to not just bottle it up inside, but to really let those things out. Now I'm going to turn this over to Bethany.
Thank you so much, Helen. All right, to continue on with the discussion for how to get those feelings out and discuss those. Sometimes there will be communication barriers, such as parents who can hear with deaf kids may not be able to have the same shared language. There's oftentimes many different disorders as well that are barriers to communication. So we want to talk about what the parents can do to interact with their children. So a feelings chart can be very helpful. You can find many online. Also, emoji faces are very helpful. You can have it as a family project. Maybe take pictures of various family members, such as mom is happy here and dad is sad here. And then collect those. And then you can ask the child, if their behavior is a little off, you can show them that and ask them. And the child can point to how their feelings are matching what's on the paper. In terms of artwork and drawing, this is a perfect opportunity for a child to express themselves. Maybe they don't know the specific words for deaf or hearing children. Sometimes it's hard to put a word to an emotion, but you can go ahead and draw, and that is the perfect perception for the world view that they're facing. So take a blank sheet of paper, for instance, or a blank face, and maybe it's a picture of a school building that you show first and say, okay, how are you feeling about that, about school, and let them draw. Maybe you can show them a picture of family, or give them some sort of a prompt that then they will do artwork for and express how they're feeling in regards to that. You may pick up on red flags or something odd that you need to reach out to the school counselor or a primary care physician, which will help in order to learn how to control those behaviors and have early intervention. So this is something you can simply Google, this kind of image of a blank face, so that you can express, how are you feeling right now? Go ahead and draw your eyes, your nose, your mouth. You can do a feelings chart as well, and it essentially becomes a self-portrait. Now, of course, at home, it's a perfect opportunity for adults to sit down with the children and say, okay, we're going to spend some time playing together. Let's play school. And then observe how the child plays and interacts with different inanimate objects, such as dolls and other things. Do they have them hitting each other, or are they playing appropriately and nicely with each other? That's a good opportunity to do a check-in on how their day-to-day may be going. Now for the final two on the school bus is in regards to how they're feeling, because sometimes teenagers won't say anything to parents. It's short phrases and they don't want to communicate because often they think parents aren't interested in what they're doing. Sometimes they truly feel that way. So if you can find a time to really engage with your child. It could be go out and play basketball. It doesn't matter if you're good at it or not, but go and, shoot some hoops. Go baking with them. Or if kids like video games, say, can I watch you while you play one of your video games? Show them that you're interested in what they like to do. And that's something where the kids can then understand that parents do want to engage. They like to see what they're up to. And that's going to enhance that kind of connection between them. And then also, like Helen said, noticing the difference between anxiety, grief, and depression and what symptoms are emerging. It's really important to see and try to enhance those endorphins. You can go to Google or Go Noodle and do fun games and activities and things like that. There's yoga for kids, Cosmic Kids Yoga, that can teach them mindfulness and breathing and how to incorporate that with storytelling, because kids tend to be very visual. And a perfect example is when they have health issues, you can actually show them different videos associated with that. Now we also have British Sign Language, which is different than American Sign Language, which is something that kids might be very interested in because they already know ASL, and that's something in relation to what they like to do, but a little bit different. Now we have ASL Nook with different stories and themes like Christmas and feelings and colors, and if parents don't know sign language, it's still good to have the kids sit with them and maybe even ask the kids to teach you what some of those signs are. And it's also expressing that you as an adult are interested in learning their language to communicate with them. So there's a variety of resources that I will show at the end of this PowerPoint that are online resources, etc., which are good for you to continue to enhance and grow with these materials. Now, another option is to use books. You can type into Google and look for picture books on grief, or picture books on loss, picture books on courage. There's a variety of resources. You can find any book on any topic. Go to the library and bring it home and read it together with your child. And once you're done reading that, then ask the child, have an open discussion, an open conversation, and just say, well, how was your day? Oftentimes, if you do it right when they get home from school, you can't get them to open up, but that book is a window of opportunity that just initiates that contact. If parents don't know sign language, though, when they read the book with a deaf child, they may feel a little unsure about how to do that. But there's various stories online that you can do on YouTube and various things that you can find on trauma and grief, and start there. That way the kid can watch it with you, and then you can start to have a conversation after that. For music, a child, even a deaf child, may like to listen to music, and that's something that they may want to pick a certain song that matches their mood. So that may be something where the parent can then say, why did you choose that song? It seemed very sad and slow. Is it because you're sad? And that can help them to express their emotions as well. I want to go ahead and teach you some signs that you can use with your deaf kids, or even hearing children with various communication needs. These are some common phrases that may appear. So, for instance, we'll start with you. You want, so using your full hands, do you want to talk? Okay, you want to talk. Okay. Then we have, how are you feeling? How? Okay, so using your thumb hand shapes. How are you feeling? Use your middle finger there. How are you feeling? Do you need a break? Okay, so this is an X, or you crook your index finger. So need a break, or another sign is need a break. So there's two signs for break. It depends on the deaf child. It may depend on what their teacher has taught them or what they prefer to use. So follow your child's sign. One of those two for break. Okay. And when we have are you okay, you can simply say okay, the letters in American Sign Language, or say are you all right? Are you okay? Or are you all right? Those are two forms. How's school? How's school? How's school? And then, do you need help? Again, with that index finger crooked, do you need help? Need help. So let's review these again. You want to talk. Do you want to talk? How are you feeling? Do you need a break? Or a break? And are you okay? Or are you all right? How's school? Do you need help? So now for your feeling signs. Happy. Make sure you have the appropriate facial expression. You don't want to seem dull and unexcited if you're talking about happy, right? It should match. Sad. Okay, sad. Tired. Tired. You kind of shrug your shoulders. Angry. Angry. I'm okay, I'm so-so. Scared. Scared. Let's review. Happy, sad, tired, angry, so, and scared. Again, if you forget these, you can go online. ASL Nook specifically has a lot of feeling signs for emotions available. There are great resources out there. And I will turn it over to Maryann.
All right, so we do have different signs that we will use throughout this side of the presentation: structure, patterns, routine, and transitions. Okay? So we all have routines, right? And there are several examples, right? A lot of us get up in the morning and we have to have our coffee every morning, right? If one day our coffee machine goes awry and our routine is messed up for the rest of the day. Or another example is maybe we have our typical path that we take to work every morning, but all of a sudden one day there's a detour and that messes up our entire routine, right? We are a wreck after that. Try to get the clicker to work here. Okay, sorry about that. So as you can see, I have a list here of weekend routines, just several different things that might be your normal weekend routine. This is what I do, actually. So I have written them down here to help me remember what I do, and it's also good to have a list, and I can check it off as I check each one off as a part of my weekend routine. So structure, remember I just talked about structure. That was the first one that I threw out at the beginning. This is going to be very relative to the big picture, okay? Patterns are related to structure. Routines are related to patterns. And why am I doing this? There are several different reasons. One example here is structure. If we're speaking of the school year, this presentation is generally focused on children and the school year. That is structure for them. The patterns specifically are related to the school day in our metaphor here. So if you think about, we start school in August, we have fall break, we have Christmas break, we have spring break, and we have summer break. So that is our normal pattern for our school year. As far as routines go with our school year, we have your typical day. You go into school, you go to your classroom, you have your different classes, you have lunch, then you have more classes. You know, this here at school, it happens in this building typically. That is our pattern and routine, right? Patterns and routines are very important because they help us feel as people that we have a little bit of control in our lives. We are able to predict what will happen next. For children, some behavioral issues or challenges or temper tantrums are able to be reduced if we can enhance these patterns or routines. Sometimes students will have anger or frustrations, and we're able to help reduce those if we can enhance our patterns and routines. It makes individuals feel more safe and comfortable in their setting, and especially if there are no surprises. Those routines and patterns are important for predictability. If we feel that we have to do something, we're able to align that with the pattern and routine that we have developed already. When we do it, we're not necessarily sitting back and watching it passively happen. We're able to be a part of it and be involved in the pattern or routine that is happening. It helps us feel more confident and able to be successful. This is also in regards to our time management and feeling more in control of our time. Those patterns, those routines are happening every day around the same time, so we are able to be a little bit more in control of our time and able to do these normal routines because we are used to doing them. If we learn something new, that will take extra time within our routine, and sometimes that is a little bit hard to control for children. Routines help us, if something were to go awry or something is out of our normal routine, they help, when we go back to our routine, it helps make transitions a little bit more easier. So here's one example of that. This might happen every day. We usually take a bath or a shower, right? We eat, we brush our teeth, we're able to get dressed and ready for the day. That is our normal routine in the morning, okay? What we do not do every day are things like, if we're sick, hopefully not, hopefully not every day, I should say. We might go to the doctor. Hopefully we don't have to, and hopefully not every day. But if we're sick, that's a routine. We go to the doctor. If we go to church, maybe there's an activity that happens after church. Things that happen routinely, but not every day. They're still a part of our routine, though. Now, previous to COVID, children were able to see their teachers at school. They were able to see and socialize with their friends and different staff members here. They had a routine of socialization. They felt comfortable. And then when COVID hit, our routines changed quick. It was not a slow transition, it was almost overnight. So currently, and has for the last 18 months, we have a different routine. And I will call that the COVID routine, because change is inevitable and has been for the last 18 months. It happens quickly and oftentimes unpredicted. So this slide indicates what I just went through. We talked about why routines are important. I'll go a little bit more in depth here. So there are 3 R's and 1 G to help you remember why routines are important. Sometimes we might have to reteach what has happened before. Just generally speaking, just kind of reteach what has happened before in order to start the process. We might also have to remind them of what has been taught. We might also have to review by modeling or showing the routine. Maybe a child isn't quite gotten into the habit, but once they're able to copy what's being done, they remember and will soon become a habit for them. So you have to model and show what routine you're aiming to obtain. The last one here, giving positive feedback. Making sure you're giving them thumbs up or clapping to indicate they're doing the correct thing. We want to build their confidence and feel that they are able to continue implementing the routine. How to do this when communication is a challenge can be challenging in and of itself. For a child that's deaf, hard of hearing, or hearing, communication can be challenging. There are a few reasons why. Let me move on to the next slide here. So you'll see this top square. If I were to sign or speak something, we might think that the other person that we are speaking to comprehends what's being said, and maybe the message is vague and not as clear as we're intending. They might not fully grasp what's happening, but we might think, oh, they've got it, right? When we sign or when we speak. But that might not be the case. Every time you have communicated with a person, have you always 100% comprehended what has been said? 100% of the message? Not always. Myself, not always. Sometimes there's a little obscurity in the message, and you need some clarification. So this is very important with children as well. So back to communication. Let's talk a little bit more about what communication is and why it's so important. There are many different ways to communicate. We have sign language. We can utilize that. Bethany just taught us a few signs that we can utilize. And you can also utilize the internet, right? There are several different websites and resources that you can find online with other resources and signs that you can learn. We also have visual cues. This is visually seeing something, and I'll show you what I mean here. Using a picture or an image to show what you are cueing is very important. There's also symbols that we can utilize. Especially with younger kids, when we have a stop sign, we all know what that symbol means, right? So maybe that child doesn't quite understand that yet. So finger spelling stop, or if you don't know the sign stop yet, maybe showing them that sign, they should be able to connect what you're intending to communicate. Write or draw on paper is also an option. So utilizing communication that way. A dry erase board might be an easy purchase for you to utilize this. They can draw or write simple phrases or words that you are able to communicate in some way or another. And we also have technology now. We have texting, and our kids are better at it than us sometimes, right? So texting back and forth, utilize that to your advantage. Use that with them in order to text back and forth to communicate if they're We need communication to establish routines. If there's no communication, routines will be difficult to maintain. Routines lead us to transitions, right? They guide us in order to have an easier transition in the future. It helps us connect what is happening to what will happen. So speaking of transitions, children oftentimes are better with transitions when we have communication, when they're able to understand what will happen next. They can predict what is coming down the road. So coming back to school when fall break is finished, they're usually able to know that. Or when Christmas break is done, they come back to school. That is a part of their normal routine. Same with spring break and summer break, right? That is part of their quote-unquote normal. But if they're not going through transitions, or rather if they are going through transitions, and such as COVID, we are not sure when we're coming back to school. We're not sure what the school day looks like. There's a lot of confusion happening with children and with the school and their normal routine. So oftentimes they'll respond with, "What are we doing?" They're not sure what to expect, what transitions or what change looks like, because those changes will become expectations and can help them feel a little bit more willing and able to handle what is to come. Yourselves, and myself included, have to have patience, a lot of patience, in order to go through these transitions together. We can change our attention, like Helen and Bethany were talking about. We have to change our attention to focus on the child. And when we're planning transitions with children, we have to be prepared. That is the best, at least as best as possible. So how do we do that? We just talked about communication and how important it is, and how challenging it can be at times as well. So what can we do? How can we implement these easier transitions? So here's one example. So you can see these are the visual cues we were mentioning previously, showing them a picture that says wake up, so they're able to know when they're waking up and then what would be next on their normal routine, on their schedule. So you can see in that folder there's little Velcro tabs. And also on the second picture, there's pictures, visual cues of what comes next and what's happening for the rest of their day, you know, in the order that they're happening. Wake up, wash your face, that sort of thing. You might also be able to utilize, you know, if we're saying it's time for the school bus to arrive, or maybe the school van in our case. If the time is changed and you're unsure how to communicate with your child of the time change, now let me preface this with saying I am not an artist, so I utilized the internet and printed these pictures. But show them a picture of the bus. Show them in gesture, we're coming now, the bus is coming now, come on, right? You can utilize pictures and images. Maybe the school van in our case, and our vans tend to look like this. So show them a picture of what it actually looks like. Point, use gestures. You don't have to have communication to point and gesture, right? You don't have to be fluent in sign language. And you can learn one sign here, now. Show the picture and then sign now to indicate that the bus is here and we've got to go. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm checking in with the interpreters over here just to make sure they're caught up with sometimes I sign fast. I want to make sure we're on the same page before I move on to the next slide. All right, so another way for children to be a part of this is to have choices. So we call this a win-win situation. So here's an example. We might have a child that comes home and they have homework that has to be done, and oftentimes this is quite the struggle, right? Sometimes a fight even at home to get their homework done. I know some kids that actually will fight with their parents because they don't want to do their homework. And we all know how important it is. So we can give our child choices. I usually stick with 2. You can say we can do homework now, or we can do homework later, and then set a specific time for that. So I'll give you an example. And again, I don't have to use a lot of signs to communicate this. And again, my preferred friend is technology for printing, so I did not draw these. But here's one example. Okay, this sign says homework now, or homework at 7. Okay, so you can see the time change between the 2 choices. That is what we're trying to decide, the time as to when we're doing our homework. So the child can know that they're either going to do it now or do it at 7. They're not able to procrastinate past that. So it's still a win-win situation because they are making the decision. The homework must be finished. They're able to decide for themselves whether it be now or later around 7 in my example. And the homework is still able to get finished. It gives the child the feeling of more power, and there's less of a power struggle between the child and the parent. If you were to give a third choice, A, B, or C, for example, the child might choose that third choice. And sometimes they will say, well, my choice is I'm not doing it. And I will say, I did not give you 3 pictures. You have 2. So you have to pick between 2, A or B, now or later. So this might be another example as to help with transition. It's called counting down, okay? So we can start with 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, and now. So you can help your child prepare mentally to know that something is going to happen in 15 minutes, or provide whichever number you're thinking. And it might not be exactly 15 minutes in your example, but giving them a countdown of when the thing is happening, then it will be able to help them better mentally prepare. And again, I printed these. So you can show them the number 15, which is indicative of 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and you can sign it if you know the sign. If not, just hold the paper. So you can add the paper and the sign together if you're able. 5. 1, so 1 minute, and now. So whatever it is we are speaking of is happening now. And that way the child is aware and able to predict that in 15 minutes, and 10 minutes, and 5 minutes, they are able to predict and be mentally prepared in order to do the task that you've given them. Now, all of this that we have discussed thus far will help children be able to transition a little bit more smoothly and also make them feel more calm during the process. The anxiety will also hopefully be reduced, as well as the confusion and unpredictability. Hopefully, your child will feel a little bit more comfortable in their setting and with what's coming next. Thank you. I will pass it on to Bethany.
Now, to summarize, Maryann was talking about routines and transitions. Helen was talking about feelings and making sure that the child's okay. How do we discuss that? Because grief, anxiety, and depression are rampant. So check-ins are oftentimes a great strategy to implement. So I know we're busy. I know there's soccer practice and basketball games, and older siblings have activities, and younger siblings have activities, and parents are busy with work and meetings and professional development. There's a lot that goes on with life. So when can you do a time? When can you check in with a child? But it's important to have that. It's important because then you're able to assess and gauge your child's well-being and thoughts based off of their day-to-day norm and if something is a little off. It becomes a part of your routine if you add a check-in. You may introduce them to the concept and say, okay, we're going to be doing something different this week. How are you feeling about that? And as Helen was providing examples of grief, anxiety, and depression, you may notice that sometimes there's a struggle with school and parents have to reach out to the school counselor or talk to someone because their day-to-day routine may change. Now, if a child seems quote-unquote fine, there seem to be no signs that they're unwell, it's still good to do a check-in. Maybe not daily, but once a week may be important. And then if you start to notice those signs and symptoms, go ahead and adapt that to becoming a check-in every day to make sure that they're doing well. But it will become a part of the routine. The child will know what to expect. They may even approach me to initiate that check-in. How do I do a check-in? Especially if I can't communicate with them. It's still good that you do it. Do it daily if you have to. There may be communication barriers, and that's what I want to provide some ideas for you to use. So Maryann was talking about the internet is your best friend is a great resource. So just like I was talking about, you can take pictures of family members making different faces, such as happy and sad. You can also print emoji faces from online. Print a picture of the school, so St. Rita, for instance, and say, okay, at school, show them the picture. How did you feel about it? And then they can point to excited, sad, angry, etc. In terms of transportation, that can be an issue for children. Sometimes it's fine at school because the teacher understands your child. But at transportation, there's barriers because the driver may not be able to communicate, or there's an issue with another student. So you may want to show them the device that's used to transport them, the school bus or the school van, and ask how they felt about that. Drawings are also important, or role-playing with students. You could even buy a school bus and then play with your child and see how they interact with it. That can be a part of this check-in process. In terms of when to do check-ins, these are often the best times to do them. Now, you know your child best. For example, with my daughter, when I pick her up from kindergarten, if I ask her, how's your day? She does not want to talk about it at that moment. So I've quickly learned that that's not the time for her, that later on, when she warms up and we've had dinner, she's a little bit more approachable. Sometimes kids are ready. As soon as they get home, that's all they want to talk about. They want to talk about their day. So it is dependent on your child and their personality, but if you try to ask them about their day and they seem to shut down, then just hold off for a little while, do another activity, and then you can initiate that conversation. But the best times are usually either at dinner or straight upon arrival from school back at home. Now, what I would suggest you avoid is not doing it on the weekend because that's your time to unwind, that's family time, friend time, and sometimes that's the last thing kids want to think about. They don't want to talk about the negatives that happened during the week or what happened at school. And then right before bedtime may not be the best idea as well because that's time to rest. If I ask them, so how was your day? Right as they're getting ready to sleep, then all of a sudden they become anxious and they can't go to sleep even though they were ready because all of these thoughts come crashing in at once. So it's important to think about the appropriate times to do check-ins because you want to encourage their rest so that they're ready to approach the next day. Bedtime is the time to rest. And that's a safe place. The bedroom should be a safe place for the kids to decompress, sleep, and be ready to go the next day. All right, any questions? I'm going to open it up here. And as a note as well, there are many resources for learning ASL, but also St. Rita has sign language classes for the community that are open to the public. It happens 3 times a year, fall, usually around January, and then spring. So those are options if you want to learn sign language. St. Rita has classes. Sometimes they are full, but there are other community resources that have classes available within the Cincinnati-Dayton regions. And if you Google Cincinnati ASL American Sign Language classes, Cincinnati or Dayton, then oftentimes you'll find those available classes and resources. This is our contact information. We will have other resources, papers, and handouts. But if you need more information, such as St. Rita information, there's business cards that are available in the back. And thank you all for coming. Oh, we do have a question?
I do, sorry. My question is, I'm a special education and early childhood major at Mount St. Joseph, and what future when I have kids who may not be nonverbal, would you suggest using the emotion cards at night, or would that be a time where you would wind down from them and try to get them to use their emotions or try to verbalize it?
So if a child is ready, they seem open, then go ahead and take that opportunity. But if not, then you have resources like asking them to draw something. That might be a good instance to get the conversation going. If it's not a good time, they're not ready to start that discussion, verbally or non-verbally, still it's good to have that check-in. Have the resources at the ready, do the check-in with the child, and try to produce that art and so forth for them to open up. Do you have anything to add, Helen?
If they bring it up, and that's when it's on their mind, I think it's fine to talk to them even though you're trying to get them to go to bed. But I would probably tell them that we're going to talk more about it tomorrow, and then switch maybe to singing a lullaby or rocking them or doing something that kind of goes back to the calming. Maybe they listen to, if you're working with a hearing child, with a relaxation, or signaling to them, oh, why don't we do your relaxation exercise now, so that they get calmed back down, ready for sleep.
Thank you. Yeah, we talk about in the classroom a lot,
Yes.
obviously with being educators, but we never really talk about in home, so I'm always curious what people have to say about when children are back at home, because we don't get to see that.
Yes, and a lot of times, it's when they're going to sleep and separating that they do get more frightened, and that's when they'll often say that there's something in their closet or something under their bed, and you don't want to say, tough luck, I'm out of here. And so reassuring is really important then. And there's a couple of very good books. One's called There's an Alligator Under My Bed. There's one called There's a Nightmare in My Attic. Sometimes I would read those during the day so they could talk about it then. And then when they are going to bed, you can say, oh, that's like the little boy who had the alligator. He thought he had an alligator under his bed. So that it's something you weave into the day, and then you'll see it get better at night, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add as well, if there are communication barriers, you may be able to get a stuffed animal as a visual aid and then try to act out those calming feelings, like go to bed, hug it, love it, that kind of thing. No monsters in the closet. Use those gestures, those pantomimes, so that they feel like it is a safe place. Draw a picture even, and just try to brainstorm, that you want to make sure that you're explaining with tangible things what those emotions could be. For a deaf child, then they could see that and be like, oh, I'm in a safe place. That's helping me to calm my thoughts, my emotions, and everything.
And one other thing I would add is most children really like a transitional object, whether it's their teddy bear, whether it's a blanket. And sometimes parents feel like it's babyish and they want to take it away. But I've seen many a person go off to college or a job and they keep it somewhere nearby. It is comforting and it gives them a sense of security. So those things help too. I'm all for having something that, you know, they can kind of feel, makes them feel secure in their own bed.
Good question, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, all right, well, thank you all for coming.